Hey everybody, this is Ben Spear. I am leading a workshop on Monday, July 21st called Branding for Startups. And rather than take valuable time away from that session with a lecture where I just stand and tell you things, I figured I would record it in advance and flip the classroom so that when we get together, we can spend our time in a focused workshop. That workshop will entail looking at someone's startup, a student startup in the class, and taking it through a agile brand development cycle, which I will outline later on in this lecture. All right, so once again, this course is called Branding for Startups. My name is Ben Spear. I'm an independent consultant. I do brand strategy and design. A little bit about my history. I have a BFA in graphic design from BU. I am a graphic designer by trade, but took up brand strategy and brand acceleration in the past 5 years. I've also done some qualitative market research. My clients are, they really range industries from Berkeley to Harvard. I've done some work for Procter & Gamble, Mass Challenge, and I do a lot of work for very small, very young startups whose obviously name you would never hear. My passion project is Brand Hack, and that was an attempt to bring brand strategy and design thinking into the early seed stage startup community, and we can talk about that more later. Here's what I'm going to talk about with you today. This lecture falls into 3 parts. The first is why brand, where I talk about where brand actually comes from. People didn't just make it up one day. Then I'm going to talk about industrial age versus information age brands. That's sort of where we're at right now in the brand community. We're on the edge between two different types of branding. And then I'm going to talk about lean brand development in the final section. The first lesson to learn, when we use the word brand, what we're really talking about is a relationship. Brand certainly relates to your name, your logo, your tagline, your copywriting, your website. All those things are part of the brand ecosystem, but the word brand really talks about the relationship that you have with your customers, the relationship they have with you, the relationship you have with your employees, and on and on. It's talking about relationships, which is a great way to kick off the first section, why brand? Where does it come from? I go way, way back to when we were cavemen in the Paleolithic period, and I did some casual research on what life was like back then, 2.5 million years ago. People always think that we were sort of alpha-driven societies, that we had strict top-down leadership, but that's actually not true. We roamed the earth in small groups, which were essentially egalitarian. Leadership was dynamic, and that meant that we as groups sort of chose our leaders based on the task at hand, who was going to lead a hunt, who's going to make a fire, obviously sexual selection, who's going to be my mate, things like that. And in this environment, because the number of people in our lives was so low, information was personal. Information transferred from one person to the other. And I think that because we evolved in this environment, that mode of thinking about information is permanent. Fast forward to 10,000 years ago, during the Neolithic Revolution, we're starting to form city-states, societies. We have permanent settlements, agriculture, and in settling permanently, what we start to do is introduce this pseudo-personhood of the city-state, where information becomes mediated and socialized. So information is really 1 to 100 in this environment, because as we think about the nation or state or city or settlement that we belong to, we typically are thinking about too many people to actually know and trust very well. So we lump all those people into this pseudo-person. It's Mesopotamia, or it's Jericho, or today it's America. And in my mind, this is really where brands originated. Our Paleolithic minds had to collapse these large numbers of people into this person-type concept that we attribute very personable values and traits to. When we think about brands today, we love them, we hate them, they're dear to us, they can make us cry, we have memories associated with them, and on and on. Those qualities are very personal qualities. Fast forward to 250 years ago, at the dawn of the industrial age, the formation of the corporation. And this is really just a soft extension of the Neolithic Revolution. Instead of fidelity to nation states, we discovered that people could have fidelity to corporations, to products. And in this environment, information, like the products that it was attached to, was mass-produced, and brand was mass-produced. This is a one-to-many. It's unidirectional, so we would just have an idea, we'd build a factory, we'd create the product, mass-produce it, we'd send it out. People would either buy it or they wouldn't buy it. They didn't have much of an ability to tell us anything about what they wanted. And towards the end of this age, market research definitely started picking up that slack and trying to find out what people want, sometimes in effective ways, sometimes not effective. Today, we're in what I call an information singularity. And this is the information age, the internet age, whatever you want to call it. Started about 30 years ago, so it's still pretty young, although moving very fast, as we all know. And what's really being developed here is a planetary consciousness where information is ubiquitous. It's many to many. It's multi-directional, it's multifaceted, and it's no longer at a premium. Information is like oxygen. It's just everywhere. So we can't mass produce it in the same way that we did in the industrial age, and this has a huge impact on brand. Brand can't be mass produced. We can't sit in a room and decide what we're going to tell people and what they're going to think about us and then create branding, positioning statements, as well as logos, websites, copy, all that stuff, and cook it all up and then serve it to people. Now people talk back, and so the creation of a brand is really a many-to-many conversation. This has huge implications for the way that brands are developed. So the lesson to come out of this first section is that brand occurs naturally. Brand, or relationships, are fundamental to the human experience. It isn't something that Mad Men made up or that Apple made up or something like that. It's really an extension of the way the human brain works. In the second section, I'm going to talk to you about these two middle phases from Section 1, the last two phases from Section 1, the industrial age versus the information age, and really I want to dig into how that impacts brands. The best way to do this is to talk about where branding actually comes from. The word brand means to burn or to burnish. It's from Old English, I think, or a Germanic root. And we started doing it to cows. That's really where it comes from. Cows, all of whom could graze in a common area, needed to be differentiated by who owned them, and so they would, as we all know, fire up the iron and sear it into the cow's flesh. This was a very product-focused approach to brand, in that we looked at the cow not as a cow, but as a stack of meat. And when we talk about customers as conversions, which is a common industry term, we're doing the same thing. We're not taking into account who they are as people. We're just focusing on the moment of conversion. And this is a very industrial age approach. The primary purpose of this was to simply generate wealth. It's a pretty exploitative practice. It looks at consumers' wealth and time and attention as a raw material to be extracted and exploited. And the position here is really one of teaching or forcing, and it's very patriarchal. So this is a very top-down, unidirectional, do what I tell you, trust what I tell you mode, which worked really well when consumers had very limited access to information. It used to be that corporations were the only ones who could provide the information about their products through advertising and packaging. But all that has changed in the information age, and to underscore that, I really want to talk about this amazing woman, Temple Grandin. She is a high-functioning autistic woman who, in her teens, met cows. She'd never really known them before, and she was intrigued by their behavior. She felt a preternatural kinship to them, and she saw the way that they were being handled in meatpacking factories. She didn't like it, and she knew that it was wrong, so she... I'm sorry. That's a phone. Okay, it's over. Sorry about that. I'm in a conference room at Work Bar. She looked at the experience of a cow, and she focused on them as partners in the meatpacking process. She knew that they had wants and desires and needs, and just like humans, they had a natural way that their brain worked. So she lived with cows. She got down in the dirt with them and crawled around, as you can see her doing here. She walked on her hands and knees through the killing floor to see what it felt like, and she watched cows. She figured out, among many other things, that they like to move in curved pathways because it soothes them. It makes them feel like they are moving back into the herd. They're a herd species. So, one of the things she did in the meatpacking factory plans was to create a series of curved pathways. Long story short, people fought her tooth and nail in the beginning, but she won in the end because as her designs were implemented, accidental deaths in meatpacking factories went down. The focus here is less on generating wealth and more on generating value for the consumer, or in this case, the cow. It's collaborative. She got right down in there with them and used empathy and understanding to get a hold of what they went through. And this customer relationship is really learning. She acknowledged that she had to learn about them in order to serve them properly. And then once she understood everything about them, to guide them on the right path. And the relationship here is not patriarchal, but fraternal. It's a very egalitarian relationship. I don't know if any of you have heard of Eric Ries. He's a pretty big deal. He is the lean startup guy, so he talks a lot about this launch and learn, fail fast approach. We can get into that more in the session. But he says that what creates value for a startup is learning if we are on a path to a sustainable business, and that successful companies have to make that shift in perspective from making stuff to learning which stuff to make. So think about the difference between branding in the industrial age and branding in the information age. It's not about creating messages simply that consumers will consume. In fact, the word consumer is sounding more and more like a misnomer these days. And what we're doing now is we're using communications tools to learn what kind of a relationship consumers want from us. And then we are responding to that by creating that relationship. Let's look at some industrial versus information age brands. Blockbuster and Netflix. Blockbuster just assumed that they could keep making the same physical product, the same experience over and over again, the brick and mortar video rental store. And Netflix actually took a moment and said, you know what, what's best for consumers? How do they want to experience movies? And then they used that understanding to create a robust software tool. They didn't even compete with Blockbuster on their own terms. Tesla, similar. Ford, as we all know, is the granddaddy of the assembly line. But Tesla's taking a different approach. Instead of trying to make incremental improvements on the car, they're reimagining it from the ground up. So they're less of a car manufacturer, they're more of a battery maker. And I think it's batteries that are going to take them into the next century. Hilton and Airbnb, everyone's familiar with this relationship. Hilton really bogged down with creating the same physical experience over and over again. Airbnb platforming the experience of travel and hospitality, and empowering their users to experience travel in the way that they want to experience it. Values have changed. People don't want the hotel lobby anymore. They want a living room, they want a backyard, they want the local coffee shop. Even within a single company, we see this tension between industrial and the information age brand development. GE is doing a project now with Eric Ries called FastWorks, where they are startupizing several of their departments, breaking them down into small groups and allowing them to work iteratively and rapidly as a way to stay ahead. So this is something that everyone now needs to think about, not just startups. And as a footnote to this slide, I'll say that many startups I work with think that they only have to be agile in the beginning, when the truth is that the rules have changed completely, and the agility that they undergo in their early stages really has to stay with them. The thing to learn from this second part is that industry is, if not over, it's ending. The idea that we can spend $1 million to create a factory that will create products that people will just buy and that will give us a sustained competitive advantage no longer holds. We must create an architecture that allows us to be responsive, to our consumers, to their changing wants and needs, to the changing technologies that allow us to deliver this messaging and these products and these experiences. And that company looks very different than the industrial age company. That brings us to our third and final segment for this lecture, Agile Brand Development, which is essentially what I hope to workshop with you during our time together. You can see on the left a diagram representing industrial age brand development. You have an idea, you build a factory, you create a product, and that's pretty much the end of the story. You hope that that product can give you sustained competitive advantage for a very long time, enough time to save up enough money to build another factory and make another product. In the information age, where barriers to entry for business formation are exceedingly low, we have, and this is really a restatement of Eric Ries's lean startup diagram. You start with your ideas, you build them, you build a factory, you create a product, you measure the success of that product, you gather data, you learn from that data, and you send that data into the next round of development. And you're really not building a factory here. What you're building is just a means to get a minimum viable product out the door. Minimum viable product, for those of you who haven't heard that term before, is really just the absolute minimum quality product that you need to produce to either prove or disprove your idea. I think there's an added layer to this based on where I'm coming from. I think that brand really is the missing element in this equation. Certainly in the industrial age, brand informed the ideas that you would have on what to do, and then the entire process, building a factory, making a product. In the information age, we have to touch the brand every time we come up with a new idea. It's required. Every time we sit down and say, how are we going to adapt this product based on what we learn, we have to stay within some kind of guidelines for our relationship with our customer, which means if I make ice cream and during the course of testing this new ice cream flavor out with some people, I find out that they're actually sick of ice cream and they're kind of in the mood for blueberry pancakes. It would be going against the brand if we pivoted and started making blueberry pancakes, which doesn't mean we can't make blueberry pancakes, but that's a different brand. That's a different relationship with the customer. By the same token, if the ice cream was very, very successful and the thing that people liked about it the most were the blueberries inside, we could pivot and become a blueberry foods company, and that would be staying within our brand to go ahead and make blueberry pancakes. So really the point here is that brand is a touchstone for this process. It's a way to funnel down and channel the ideas that we have. And I'll give you an example of a recent project of mine. There's a guy, he's invented this great gadget. He's still working full-time, so he's very, very early stage with the company. This gadget is, as you can see in the business cards, it's a little carabiner clip, but it measures force, the amount of force and tension in the clip, and transmits that information to your smartphone using Bluetooth. So he has wired this device to 2 elastic bands and 2 handles, and has devised all of these different ways that you can use this thing to work out for strength training, essentially. And we sat down, and over the course of an hour and a half, we named this product Oaken. We came up with some sort of brand personality traits. We assumed that the relationship he would have with his customers, we assumed that his customers would be bodybuilders, that they'd be strength trainers, people who are looking to up their game. And so we kind of gave it this somewhat aggressive, somewhat masculine vibe to it. He went to a conference called HackFit, which is a bunch of people making products similar to his in the fitness industry. And he test drove this language and these business cards with a few people. And what he learned is that strength trainers, bodybuilders, they want nothing to do with this product. They are in the gym every day and they don't need to supplement this workout. Maybe when they travel, but even then, not that much. They just don't look at this as a serious weightlifting product. Who it did appeal to, however, were sort of 20 to 40-year-old women who are very athletic. They're doing multiple athletic activities, running, yoga, Pilates, Zumba, and strength training is kind of the one thing that's missing from their life. They don't go to a gym because they don't want to spend money on that. They'd rather buy yoga classes and just sort of do things on their own. And anyways, if they do go to a gym, they're too intimidated by the weight room to go in there and do strength training. So he discovered by bringing this product into the marketplace very early that his customer is very different than what he originally thought. And so he came back in, we sat down, and we adjusted the visuals a little bit to keep pace with this. The lesson here, lesson 4, is that today's brands adapt. They adapt. They have to. There is too much activity in the marketplace, too many new businesses constantly coming in, too much new technology always hitting the market to really say that I can have an idea, build a factory, create a product, and maintain a sustained competitive advantage. Competitive advantage today is somewhat transient. We must constantly be looking at our brand and figuring out how we can adapt it to suit the changing needs of our consumer. This responsiveness, this is the trust that people are looking for today. They will trust us if we respond to them. So in the last section here, I'm just going to go quickly through the workshop that we'll be using. As I said, I want to have one of you, or maybe 2 if we have time, but probably just one, someone with an early stage company that they're, or even if it's just an idea that they have, something to build, to kind of go through this process with us as a group so we can witness how it goes, how it takes place. So I'll start this session with a Q&A. So any questions you have from this lecture, I will field on Monday at the beginning of the session. And then we'll go into the workshop proper. This is essentially what we're going to be doing. I have 3 roles here. You're a partner and a customer. So you are the business owner. Your partner is maybe a consultant or someone who has come to help you, develop your business. So you need a second person to do this. And the third person is a customer who's really on par with the other 2 as someone who's co-creating this brand. We'll start out by positioning the brand. That'll take about 10 minutes. And as you can see, this is a very accelerated process. We're not meant to derive a perfect output here. We just want to drive an output. Done is better than perfect because done means we can go to market and start finding things out, important things like Oaken found out, misconceptions we had about the brand, about our audience, and it also teaches us how to do something that we'll have to do for the rest of the life of our company. We'll position the brand. That means figuring out, what your promise to your customer is, what your relationship is with them, and that can be hypothetical. That doesn't have to be permanent. We'll use that brand position to create a set of ideas to express it, ideas for products or services, or even just how to manage and express that relationship. We will build the idea out in this phase and sort of figure out exactly. We'll sort of strategize how is this idea going to get built. Then we'll produce it. We'll create a product, something final, something polished. And entering into information age cycling, we'll go into the market and measure it. So for the purposes of our class, what I'll do is I'll go outside the classroom, bring in probably a general assembly person to come in and sit for 10 minutes and listen to the produced brand, the produced product or set of services or whatever it is we feel we need to measure. And then they'll go. And then as a class, we'll analyze what they told us about what they like and what they don't like. We'll sort of crunch that data. Then we'll spend some time figuring out what exactly we learned from it. Things we didn't know before that we know now. And then we'll throw that learning into the next set of ideas where, again, we'll be touching the brand and saying, based on what we learned and where we think we need to go, how can we stay aligned with the brand to create a new set of ideas, or maybe we need to chuck the brand entirely because that relationship is not a viable one. And we'll do it all in 80 minutes. Then after that, we'll have discussion time where we can talk about what happened and what worked and what didn't work and all that good stuff. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing you guys. If you want to get in touch with me in the meantime, my email address is hello@benjaminspear.com and my Twitter handle, Benjamin Spear. I'm really looking forward to our time together on Monday. I did this class a few months ago at General Assembly, and it was wonderful. I had a great time. So hope you guys are good, and I'll see you soon.